Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, live demonstration, CyberSaint crosswalking NIST 853 to DFARS NIST 800-171. My name is Ethan Bresnahan. I'm the marketing director here at CyberSaint, and today I'm excited to be joined by CyberSaint VP of Solutions Architecture, Steve Torino, and Senior Sales Engineer, Michael Blumrich. We're so glad that you could join us for today's webinar, and with that, I will hand things off to Steve.
Hi, my name is Steve Torino, and I'm Vice President of Solution Architecture here at CyberSaint. I want to thank you for attending this webinar and also provide some background information before we jump into a demonstration of the solution. Crosswalking has been a longstanding challenge in the industry. The reality is that organizations are subject to more than one cybersecurity framework or standard of practice, depending on things like the jurisdictions where they do business, the industries in which they participate, and the types of customers with whom they wish to do business. Most of these standards are covering domains and controls that overlap, at least to some extent. And in theory, this overlap should make things easier to the extent that we can kind of be sure we comply with the control from one framework. We should be able to map it to controls from another framework and know that we've satisfied that requirement as well. In practice, it's a bit more complicated. Although the controls across two or more frameworks may cover similar content, they often have subtle differences. So for example, let's take vulnerability scanning as an example. A framework like NIST might allow for the frequency of vulnerability scanning to be customized to an organization-defined frequency, whereas the corresponding control from another framework may specify the frequency at which vulnerability scans are to be run, so something like once a week or once a month. Yes, those controls do map to each other, but the subtle difference in frequency makes them not an exact match. Another example could be control inheritance. So most of us by now are probably using some cloud services to operate our business. One of the benefits that comes with that is inheriting certain security controls, such as server patching and an infrastructure as a service model, for example. However, there are other controls for which a shared accountability model applies. In other words, we might inherit part of a control from a CSP, but still have to demonstrate requirements around things like maybe access controller configurations in-house. So what's really critical here is to understand the gap between any two frameworks. And organizations have taken various approaches to finding these gaps or doing crosswalks in order to make their lives easier, because as anybody who's done these exercises knows, it can be really challenging and time consuming. Larger, more complex organizations might roll out something like a large common controls framework, or basically a superset of sorts that can be manually applied across dozens or hundreds of frameworks even. And others might try a method like to rely on the limited set of publicly available crosswalks that are published by authoritative sources like CIS, AICPA, even the informative references to the CSF from NIST. Unfortunately, this is very limited and not available for most frameworks at all. And yet others might work with consultants, bring consultants in and have an engagement to do the crosswalking that they need. What you're going to see today is a demonstration of CyberSaint's unique approach to crosswalking. So whether it's an example of how we can leverage pre-published templates to automate those industry-accepted mappings just at the click of a button, or how to use our patented natural language processing technology to create your own templates from any framework to any other framework by identifying control associations with AI-provided confidence levels, you're going to see a real-world solution that's been custom-built to automate the manual and time-consuming process of crosswalking controls across frameworks. I hope you enjoy the demo.
In order to go through the crosswalking process within the CyberStrong platform, we're going to start in the administration area. So to get there, we're going to click on administration in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. This is by default going to take you to the manage assessments page. So from here, we're going to first identify which assessment we want to crosswalk from. So in this case, I'm going to be selecting the NIST assessment here, which is targeting 853 Rev 5. In order to start the crosswalk process, I'm going to look into the actions column, essentially, again, find that assessment, and then click on the crosswalk assessment icon here. The next step is choosing the framework that I'm going to crosswalk into from that parent assessment. In this case, I'm going to crosswalk into DFARS 800-171. Once I make that selection, the next step is choosing my mappings option. So through the natural language processing models that we leverage, we're pulling back a confidence score based on those mappings. So I can choose only those mappings that are over 80%, over 90%. If there are other templates available, they will be so here that you can select, or you can create your own mappings control by control from scratch. In this case, I'm going to choose the empty template. Next, as I said, I can go control by control and make those selections myself based on the confidence scores if I choose, or I can take an easier approach and add my top mappings for each control and then review them. And again, like I said, I can go control by control. I can add in additional mappings, or the top mappings are generally going to be substantial enough and are going to get you a fair amount of completion for that newly crosswalked assessment. So if you're wanting to review it, you can, but you definitely don't have to, and you can go straight to the next and final step, which is creating the assessment. The last two items, first, the name of the assessment. And then lastly, do we want this to be a synced assessment? What this essentially is allowing for is tying the parent assessment of NIST to the child assessment of DFARS, to where any change at the parent level will roll down automatically to that child assessment. I'm going to keep this unsynced for the time being, but I will show you what a synced assessment looks like momentarily. So I'm going to submit this. And just in a couple seconds, we now have a 90% project completed DFARS assessment. And between the confidence scores as well as the mappings, this is a very auditable process. So if I go to a map control and I go to my crosswalk history, here are the parent controls that map back to this child control here of 3.1.1 basic security requirements. Again, this is unsynced, so I can go through and make corresponding changes at the child level. If this were a synced assessment, you can still make changes at the child level. You just need to unsync the control first. So you'll notice here, can't make changes unless I unsync this, but changes will automatically roll down from the parent. So if I go to the parent control here and I change that from no to fully, I go back to the child control, you'll notice that shifts from no to yes. So again, the ability to assess once and apply to many is at your disposal within our system through crosswalking, really allowing for added efficiency and effectiveness for organizations when assessing against multiple frameworks.
Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. As always, if you're interested in learning more about CyberSaint's AI-backed crosswalking capabilities, please feel free to reach out, info@cybersaint.io, or visit us at cybersaint.io. We'll see you soon.